Guess I like looking at my own face or something. But yeah, so this guy is demanding absolute proof for no God, and he's also asking for at least 3 contradictions from the Bible. That's the problem here. You require of us absolute proof when you refuse to show us yours. And you're the one who's adding something to this universe that doesn't give us any indication that it's there. It will always be your task to give us absolute proof that he does exist, or we can ignore and laugh at you all we want. Until then, he exists as much as Osiris, Zeus, Sauron, Darth Vader, and the Tooth Fairy. When you can give me absolute proof as to why those characters don't exist, then you'll understand why I don't find your fictional character convincing either. Ancient stories written by bigoted Hebrews, Romans, and Greeks just don't cut it to someone who actually thinks about what he's being told to believe. Contradictions? Well, God first said he was perfect and unchanging. His laws are perfect and unchanging. And then what does he do? He changes his mind a few millennia in and decides he forgot how to forgive us for just apologizing for sin. He needs to change things up. Shouldn't an all-knowing entity only have to make any decision only once? By adding a completely unnecessary sacrifice of himself to himself, making his way back to heaven, eliminating any actual hint of a sacrifice, why would he need to change anything if everything was already perfect and unchanging? Why would he need to set up such a clumsy system of salvation if he had all the powers to eliminate what he didn't like about humanity? Because the possibility of infinite torture is better than not having free will? That's fucked up. There's one of the biggest blatant contradictions. A God that is perfect and unchanging tells you not to worship idols, and then changes his mind and gives you an idol to worship in his place in the form of his avatar, Jesus. Because he couldn't understand how to not let us fall into infinite torture the first time around? Give me a break. Read the story as it is, not as your pastor wants you to think it says. Grow a brain. God says thou shalt not kill, and then he orders people to kill constantly. Blatant contradiction. No arguing yourself out of that one. He wasn't sending his people against demons and dragons, he was sending them against other people who just happened to have other opinions on how to live, slandering them evil, making it obvious that the laws were just excuses for men to justify doing evil to other men. An addendum to this one is his claim that he loves everyone, and yet specifically tells us to kill homosexuals and non-believers, who will go to hell anyway. Tell me how that is even remotely close to loving everyone, when he's the one who set up hell the way it is, and it's all his own fault for programming us with things that he hates and will torture us for. As for other damning contradictions for your false god, all gods are equally false. Just give yourself a read of these. The link I'll put below, but it's the Skeptic's Annotated Bible Contradictions section. There are no excuses for these contradictions that a Christian can make without looking completely dishonest, disingenuous, or completely ignorant of the scriptures they claim to follow. If they aren't ignorant of them, they have to justify things like rape and slavery and genocide as if it was nothing. And the types of believers who can do that are the most disgusting of their cult membership. Excusing rape just because a god sanctioned it, or rather allowed for male justification of it by making laws specifically intent on discouraging victims from speaking up, such as marrying your rapist or being stoned to death along with your rapist, or if you don't scream loud enough, it's your fault. Or those who try to argue that slavery was any kinder back in the days when you were told to kill people who worked on the Sabbath? You really gonna believe that one? The people who can justify rape, slavery, murder, genocide, homophobia, sexism, racism just because they're in the Bible don't deserve to have children ever, and are the worst of your ilk next to the violent ones. People who exist are the more important than any god who is too chicken to show his face to us. Wait, a god can't be chicken. It's his human authors and supporters that are too chicken to prove him to us, throwing up the same I'm rubber, you're glue argument. God is real. I don't see any gods. Prove it. I'm rubber, you're glue. You prove it. Okay, Mr. 3-year-old, have fun in your chosen ignorance. When you start giving us some actual answers, then we'll talk. The Bible doesn't count as any answers because the Bible is the claim that still needs to be proven, when it's already been proven to be historically incorrect and historically dishonest. And so yes, I agree, you shouldn't pontificate on something you know absolutely nothing about, except for what you are told you are supposed to believe. think for yourself. One of the worst crimes of our species is limiting our brains to the crazy rules of phony gods. And I'd have free will whether a god gave it to me or not. You can't sell me something we are all evolved to have in the first place, beyond the parts of our brains that operate without our input. Nothing magical or spiritual there. It's just automated functions. God gives us free will just to force us to choose him with threats if you decide to use your free will? Are you really interested in playing this cruel game that makes no sense for an all-powerful, all-loving, all-knowing being to be creating for us, while he hides from us to make sure as many of us get infinitely tortured as possible, unless we make ourselves gullible to the words of man speaking in his stead? Men having to speak for God's intentions, a book having to speak for God's intentions, should be the biggest, most blatant, eye-opening contradiction here. That you can't see it is just an example of how indoctrinated and selectively ignorant a person you can choose to be just so they don't have to give up their comfy ancient fairy tales that most intelligent people already know are as true as leprechauns.